Have a seat, please. My name is Kevin Morgan. I'm one of the pastors here. Excited to be here today. I don't get to do this very often, and so we'll find out why later today. I'm not for sure. So I do thank Pastor Nick for letting me do this as he is taking off this weekend. And so I wonder, have you ever been in a crazy freak storm before? I know for me, in May of 2010, my daughter was about almost one in the next month, so she was 11 months old. And we are driving to Oklahoma City from Enid, and so as we're driving down, all of a sudden a freak storm comes in. So, freakish weren't ready for it at all. There were, runners at the lake pretty close to us that had to jump into trash cans to get out of the way of the hail and everything else. I actually looked up some of the pictures and didn't want to show them because they're a little gruesome on seeing the back of one of the runners from the hail hitting them. And it wasn't like little hail. This were baseball, softball size hail coming, and it was just one of those, oh crap, in the middle of a storm. So we're driving through, and all of a sudden it starts pounding our car. And as I'm driving through, I get to a overpass and drive underneath. But there are cars up on the sides, and it's a 4-lane highway, so two this way, two that way. And I'm afraid of staying in that because if I stay there, if someone comes through, I'm going to get creamed with my wife and my baby girl. And okay, I'm gonna keep going to see if I can get to the next overpass, next place for protection. And driving as we continue, Sarah and I are yelling at each other, not because we're mad at each other, that's other times, right? And screaming loudly because it's hitting the car so loud, so hard. Driving 10, 15 miles per hour because I can barely see the lines on the road where I'm at because it's so heavy of a hailstorm. Then the back window breaks. As I can't see what's going on, but I know there's glass everywhere on my rear-facing child seat. And Sarah's starting to panic as we talk or yell at each other, grab her, bring her up to the front, hoping nothing else breaks, not seeing where we're going, not knowing where the next spot is. I don't know if you've been in a situation or storm like that, but I didn't know what to do right then. I don't know if I'm going to make it to another place. I don't know if I need to put them in the floorboard and cover them myself so that I can protect my wife and my baby girl. I just stuck and just praying, going, where am I going? Is there anything going to be coming up? And finally, another overpass comes and no one else is at this one and able to turn and put the windshield to protect us. Make sure Riley is okay. Make sure Sarah's okay. And thankfully, the sunroof didn't bust in. Riley crying as she's bleeding from the glass and everything. And the car fully totaled, so totaled, they would have to replace every single part of the car, all 4 doors, the hood, the roof. I mean, it was totally just done. Talk about a scary moment to not know, as the man wanting to protect my entire family, but also not knowing how or what to do. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like that. And thankfully, we went to the hospital, took my daughter in, and literally as they're cleaning glass off, realizing, hey, nothing really, everything was just little scratches, that she was fine in a week. I wasn't fine in a week. It still brings back memories even right now of not knowing what to do in that situation. And most of the time I take pride in being as ADHD as I am to being in stressful situations and knowing the next step and thinking through everything and doing this. This is the best route and having no idea in that moment what to do. But I can worship God and trust God that he protected us through it. But I wonder, even if he didn't, would I still be able to trust and worship him in that moment? What if something did happen to my daughter, and would I still have that same trust in God at that moment, or even after that moment? Maybe you haven't been through a freak hailstorm or a horrible storm. Maybe some of you have been in some of those storms. But maybe you're going through the storm of financial and you don't know where to turn or what to do because you're just stuck right now and you want to provide for your family or yourself and I don't know what to do next. Maybe it's that person that you have prayed for, you've made sacrifices for, and yet they're still going to walk away. Maybe as a parent, that's your child walking away. Maybe as a spouse, that's your loved one walking away. And you don't know what to do next. The question is, even if they walk away, will you still trust God? Maybe you're in that medical storm right now and you don't know that next step as well. And you don't know what the outcome's going to be, whether you're going to get good news or bad news. You just know it's in limbo. And what are you going to do? Can you still trust God even if the situation doesn't turn out the way you want to? Because I think for me, and maybe this goes for you, I kind of wonder, it's really easy to trust God when we get the result we want, isn't it? But even if it's not, will we still trust him? There are 3 young men in the Bible that we're going to be talking about, and they were put into this life or death situation, not knowing the outcome, but being able to say, even if. And as we go through, I think there's going to be some parts of us that we're going to see in other characters of this story that we need to realize, is this me, or can I say even if the entire time? Pastor Nick did a great job setting us up. We talked last week about Daniel 1, and Daniel 1 was Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, and Daniel. And so we talked about the fact that culture tried to change them, and yet they said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to worship our true God. And so why are they in this place? Why are they in Babylon in the first place? Is because their ancestors, their parents, their grandparents decided not to trust God and to follow the other gods. And so that's why they're in Babylon in the first place. And so they didn't follow the rules, but let's read Daniel chapter 3, verse 1. It says, King Nebuchadnezzar made a gold statue 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide. I'm glad we don't always make everything like they did in biblical times, right? Like it was about the size of these chairs here and 90 feet tall. So someone probably pretty full of himself, right? And so verse 5 goes on to talk about, he says, as soon as you hear the word, so this is what he's saying about his own statue. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. So, if you don't know the story, this is Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego and the fiery furnace that we're going to be talking about. And so, the Jewish people have a problem with this, hopefully, right? Because they're supposed to be worshiping the one true God, and then Nebuchadnezzar is saying, hey, we're going to worship me. And so they've heard the stories. They even know why. I mean, think of the book of Judges. If you haven't read the book of Judges, let me tell you how it goes. the Israelites followed Jesus or followed God. They decided to worship other gods. God let them be taken captive by others so that they would turn to him, turn the page. God saved them. They worshiped God. They turned to other gods, turned the page. God gave them to the people that would have them turn to him again. And it just seems like Judges, every single time you turn the page, that's what they're doing. And so right now they have a choice to make. Are we going to worship this God of gold that we can see right now, or are we going to worship our one true God? And so if that's true, what happens next? So the Israelites decided, we already know that Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego are going to worship the true God just in chapter 1 that we already saw. So now we're in chapter 3. And we see them saying, we're not going to do it. So what happens? Someone starts to tattle on them. So the other officials are like, they're not going to worship. They're not going to do. And so they go ahead and tattle on them. So how many of you have brothers and sisters? Right? And how many of you got tattled on? The ones of you that are not raising your hand must have been the tattletales, right? Right? You're like, it was them. No, it was me, right? And why was that? Why would we tattle on them? Well, just like your brother and sister, you wanted something. You wanted to change the behavior of your parents or your brother and sister. You wanted to control them. I think last week we talked about that too. It's our culture that tries to change us. So guess what? Just like your brother and sister called you out, culture will call you out when you don't act according to the way that it wants you to. What do I mean by that? What does culture call us out? Well, if you reread through 5 and 6, you see that all it says is, when you hear the music, bow down to me. It does not say that they cannot worship God. It just says, in this moment, worship us. Is that not culture at the same time right now in our day and age? They don't care if you come to church. They don't care if you worship God. That's fine as long as what? You don't go against how I feel, how I want to be, and then it changes, right? I mean, think about when you get called out in our student ministry. Let's just talk about right now in our churches right now. The culture wants to change just on Facebook. I read this all the time, like, there's a problem. Why aren't churches doing this? Why is the culture telling us as a church we should do this in the first place? Because we're not acting according to the way they want, so what do? They call us out on Facebook to see if they can change our behavior, if they can change our actions, instead of coming to us and saying, hey, would you guys think about doing this? Why? Because they want to call us out to do what they want us to do. Students are the same way when it comes to victimhood, when it comes to justice, canceling culture, all these different things. Students are dealing with that. What about our marriages? How much is culture going against marriage in the first place? I mean, think about all of our TV shows. What do our TV shows have to do with adult fatherhood and stuff? Have you met other than Bluey, right? Every other male character that's as a father is usually a doofus, an idiot, or something else, right? I mean, I'm letting my kids, we're rewatching Home Improvement, right? And how much of a doofus is Tim Allen in that show? But that's how they portray us as well. And yet that's not how God has called us to be. I think about pornography and how I've seen different parts of our culture saying pornography is okay for men to watch or women to watch together and do this stuff. And then I start to look at, hey, did you realize in the science behind it that they have actually taken your brain and looked at it and shown that a person addicted to pornography has the same brain function and different parts of the brain moving at the same as a heroin addict. And yet they say it's okay for us to watch pornography in our marriages and things like that. And yet, what happens when we say we're not going to do that? All of a sudden we realize culture wants to change us, and it will call us out if we don't. So I wonder, if our culture goes against what God tells us to do, will we still trust God? Will we still trust God even if? Even if we could lose that job promotion? Even if that boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife would walk away when we're supposed to trust in God? Culture wants us to do this. Will we still trust God even if culture calls us out? So after they get touted on, what do you think the king does? He calls them before him and says, hey, I'm going to be gracious. If you will fall down and worship the statue, I will save your life. At the end of that, he actually says, who is going to save you from me? All of a sudden you see him not only trying to be gracious, but also he's still full of himself at this moment, thinking that he is God and there's nothing. And so whenever you're put into this opportunity, into this no-win situation, do you think your God's going to save you from the person standing right in front of you? And we already know he's about himself, but all of a sudden when he does this, I want to move on into verse 16. And verse 16 says this, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. Don't you wish you could be that bold in your faith? Like, God's got me, I'm good to go, I'm safe. When you think God is going to do it, whenever you are confident that God's going to do something, can you not run through a brick wall? But this other part on verse 18 says, but even if, have you noticed that's the key word today? Even if, key phrase. All right, so, but even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Even if, no matter which way the outcome is, this is where I'm going. And so I see the king next get angry. He goes into a frenzy. Why does he go into a frenzy? Because he feels that he is God. He feels that he has all command. He can do whatever he wants to do in this moment. So he sets this fiery furnace. We're not for sure. I looked up all the stuff on what a fiery furnace was. Was it a big giant thing that had a face of what? I don't know. And so, but more than likely, it was a pit in the ground that they would light up. They would have tons of wood and different stuff thrown into it, more than likely a brick kiln as well. And so thrown in, and it says they got it 7 times hotter. I don't know how they did the temperature to know it got 7 times hotter. I'm just thinking that they're just trying to figure out oil, and they probably didn't have gas, but whatever else just blew up and made it 7 times hotter. But he didn't just stop there. He also decided to wrap them in coats. What's a fiery furnace for? To burn them, right? Like they're going to be dead right at the beginning. But to prove a point, he wraps them in robes and coats and turbans and then ties them up so they can't even get out of that. And then as soon as he throws them into the fire, like the men that actually were there to throw them to make sure they got into the fire actually were killed as well. And so he throws them into it, into the heat of the fire, so that he can have his way and show people that he is the God of his life and over all of them. And I wonder if some of us have a little Nebuchadnezzar in us, that our feelings control us all the time, because guess what? Feelings will always mislead us. Because how we react is usually because of our feelings inside. And so, what do I mean by we have a little Nebuchadnezzar in us? Anybody tired when they get home from work after a long day? And what happens if your kids walk in and are fighting with each other? Do you usually go, oh, what's going on? Maybe if you have that nice motherly, but I'm not, right? And I just blow up sometimes. Anybody else? Is it just me? Like, done. Like, shut up. I don't care. Why don't I care? Why? Because my peace is now gone, and I care more about how I feel right now than what's going on with my children at that moment. Why? Because I just need a little peace right now. It's all about me at this moment. I didn't want to deal with you. My biggest pet peeve is when my kids disrespect their mother. Any other men feel that? Like all of a sudden they disrespect mom and it just sends me into that little frenzy. Why? Because they disrespected their mom? I really started to think about this. I hope most of the time it's because I'm trying to protect my wife. I'm trying to show my kids respect, to show their mom respect as well. But I sometimes wonder, them doing that and disrespecting their mom is going to make their mother very upset. And when their mother is very upset, that means my life is going to be upset. And now, all of a sudden, I'm dealing with the fact that she's upset at me, but I didn't do anything. And so now I'm getting upset to make sure that they don't upset their mother so that my life's not upset. So in reality, it's once again all about me again. Now, that's not all the time, because I do expect my boys to make sure they love their mother, that if they talk back, it's going to be a problem. But sometimes it's about me again and not about her. And I wonder sometimes how much that makes me react rather than act. And so I wonder how our feelings choose and mislead us, because what if you don't get the job that you've been working for? Are you going to trust God even if you don't get that job or that promotion? What about just you were expecting something to happen, and even if your feelings are just broken? Because here's what I want. Will you trust God even if you don't feel like it? Because sometimes I don't feel like it. Anybody else? Like, I just want to be done for a little bit. I'm tired. I don't feel like it sometimes. Last night, I got through with the wedding. I'm kind of tired after doing the wedding and the rehearsal dinner and hanging with the family. And I'm ready to go home. I need to work on my sermon today or last night to make sure I'm ready for today. And then as soon as I get home, I start working on my sermon. And then all of a sudden, someone I was sitting across from, and I know them from outside just the wedding, was in a accident because a deer decided they wanted to drive. And so what did? I go to the hospital. Why? I definitely didn't feel like it. But in that moment, I guarantee you, they felt it when I showed up at the hospital. Even though they told me, hey, we know you're studying, we weren't texting you to show you that so you'd come up here. But even though I didn't feel like it, I guarantee you, they felt it. But I wonder sometimes if our feelings mislead us, and we wonder why we react the way, and we should trust God even if we don't feel like it. How many times are we killing and harming the relationships around us, just like Nebuchadnezzar did? Because he was so in the moment of, I'm going to destroy you, he hurt the men that were around him, putting them in the fire. And how many of us are doing that? I hope that my children want to hang out with me when they graduate high school, when they grow up to be older and want to be a part of my life, because I still want to be a part of their life. But I wonder if my reactions and my feelings, the way I act towards them, are harming those relationships. I wonder if the way I feel because I want the dishwasher loaded a certain way and you didn't load it correctly and now I'm going to react to you. I wonder if I'm harming the relationship I have with my husband or my wife. I wonder if it's my coworkers and how I treat them because I didn't get the job, or maybe it's something else, and maybe your situation I didn't hit, but do we act certain ways because we don't feel like it sometimes? And so will you trust God even if you don't feel like it? So these three men are finally thrown into the fiery furnace. And this is something I learned. I've heard this story forever. My dad was the children's church pastor. He did this story a lot. All right, I still remember some of the books that my dad had that he did in children's church showing this. And I thought there was actually a time period, go ahead and put 24 up there, between verse 23 where it says he threw them in, and between verse 24. There's no time in between it. It just says he threw them into the fire. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, weren't there 3 men that tied up and threw into the fire? And they replied, certainly, your majesty. 25 says, he said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods. And so all of a sudden we see the fact that what is going on in their lives is that they weren't just after a few hours, wasn't just after a day. All of a sudden, King Nebuchadnezzar was looking down into the fire and says, oh my goodness, there's more to it. And so this is an example of Christophany. What is Christophany? I had to look it up myself. It's all right. Why? Because this is an example of Jesus Christ showing himself in the Old Testament. And so he did not show up before. When did he show up? In the fire. And so these men were tied up and bound, and when Christ was with them, what does it say? Go back to verse 24 for me. Or sorry, right there, never mind. It says that the men were walking around the fire unbound and unharmed. They were tied up before, and now they're in the fire with Christ, and they're unbound and unharmed. And in the next verse, it's not up there, it says that they didn't even have the smell of smoke on them. How do you have freedom in this moment? Because guess what? Following God, the outcome will always be unknown. I cannot make God act. And the fact is that every single situation we're put in, guess what? The outcome's unknown of how God will act. Because he is who? He's God. He has a plan. And we're going to go over that a little bit, but why do I trust him? Because even if. And so, will you trust God even if you don't know the outcome? Because guess what? Culture called them out. The king's reaction wanted them killed, but where were they saved? They were saved in the fire. And so Christ will sometimes have us go through the fire to be able to make our trust in him stronger. And I can't say how much I trust God all the time until I have the situations that I'm made to show it. It's just empty words. Anybody have those empty words before? Do I trust God? And until you fully go through that situation, do you truly trust him? I had a situation with my wife, and actually driving home from the wedding, this is where Sarah and I were talking, not about this, but about the time where she knew in our marriage that I truly loved her and that she truly trusted me. So some of you may relate to this. My daughter's about 3 years old. Lots of daughter stories today, and I only have one, all right? And so my daughter has a little bit longer bangs, and my wife is growing her hair out. And instead of just doing this, my grandmother decided to give my daughter her first haircut. Most of the moms are going, oh my goodness. Most of the men are like, I don't see the big deal. Fix it, done, we're good, right? That's how I am. I don't see that big of a deal. My wife sees a much bigger deal out of it. So I have a choice to make. Do I choose my wife in this situation or my grandmother in this situation? If you choose mother or grandmother in this situation, you probably chose poorly, gentlemen, all right? And what I mean by that is that I'm not very confrontational. I hate having to go to someone saying, you did something wrong. Let's deal with this. So I had to call my grandmother to explain to her what she did and to put clear boundaries that this stuff doesn't happen. Like if you want to do something like that with my daughter, you need to call and ask. Why? Because this is something that was very serious for our first daughter, her first technical haircut. And even though I didn't understand why she was so upset, I made a choice in that moment. And guess what? My wife truly trusted me in that moment to say, I have her back, that I truly love her. I just found this out last night, all right? So, and I did ask permission to use this story. And so, it wasn't just empty words of saying, I love you. I do back you. Guess what? Right here is the same thing, is that we have to go through the fire sometimes for us to learn that we truly do trust God. And there are some things sometimes that we won't know the outcome, and that's where we truly understand our faith in God. And so their trial, their response, their work of Christ all impacted an entire kingdom. And so the same thing can happen in our kingdom. What is that? Well, right now your kingdom should probably be your home. Whether it's just you, whether it's your family, whether it's your children, whether it's your spouse and all that. Sometimes we need to have the trials and our responses, our reactions. And with Christ, we can impact our family. Your reactions can impact your work. Your reactions can impact your church. So many of us think, hey, let's change the world. In reality, we need to change our family first. So many of us want to change what's going on there, and it may be that we need to change the little circle at our job and quit reacting to everything because of our feelings and say, you know what, I'm going to respond correctly the way God was, even if. And so their response shows three things. It shows their confidence, conviction, and trust. And so the first one is their confidence. How did they show their confidence? They trusted God's ways were better than the culture's ways. And if you think about that, what changes? Culture always changes, doesn't it? Because what was good at one time has changed now. But guess what? God has never changed in the first place. He's still the God he was. So how do we have confidence in God to be able to do that? Well, one way is to realize and see God moving. And I ask my volunteers this all the time, and I want you to ask yourself this. In the last 4 weeks, where have you seen God move in your life? And sometimes when I first started asking this, they would actually look at me like a deer in the headlights going, anyone else? If I asked you that right now, would you be on, And our confidence in God is seeing him move and saying, he will continue to move in my life. He will continue to move in your life. And so all of a sudden when we start looking at it, it becomes so much more. So many times we only think of God moving in big ways, but when's the last time that you read the word and you're going through a storm or situation and you just felt peace? You didn't know the outcome yet, but you had that peace. And have that confidence that God is going to be right there with you in the fire, right there with you and taking you unscathed through whatever it is you're going through, to be able to use you through other things to change the entire world around you. Sometimes we need to just be able to say, you know what, God has done this in someone else's life. And so being able to hear that story, being able to talk with people, because I don't think we've lost the art of the testimony, haven't we? To where, when's the last time you've talked to other people about what God is doing in your life instead of about Notre Dame winning the football game against, I'm sorry, I had to do a little thing with Pastor Nate being gone, right? But when's the last time that you have looked and seen God move? Because the more confidence we have is the more we see him move. And the more we see him move, the more we build our confidence. And it goes back and forth. But what about conviction? Conviction is realizing that life is not about you. Doesn't that go against culture? And realize that I'm in my marriage because of her. I'm the father because of them, not them for me. And realizing that it's not about me. And I wonder sometimes where we can find that conviction. And I would say there's two ways in our church that we can do that, and that's one with small groups. Are you in a small group? Small groups aren't just for people to tell people information and stuff like that. Small groups are also like the marriage one that I've been a part of for the last year. My marriage is going well, and I can pour into other marriages that may not be going as well. But guess what? The next week, my marriage may be going in through a storm. And I have other people that want to see my marriage go well. And me pouring into them is me wanting to see their marriage go well. And maybe it's not a marriage one that you're in. Maybe it's just another one where you get to iron sharpens iron. And I think a lot of our churches have lost, a lot of our brotherhood and sisterhood have lost that iron sharpening iron is rough work, isn't it? Like, it's a lot of heat. It's a lot of beating. It's a lot of different things to be able to sharpen that iron. And so, do you have people around you that are going to help you sharpen? I talk about this with Paul like a lot of times. So he's one of the other guys that preaches up here. And we talk a lot about Scripture and what it means and things like that and what he believes it means. And he may not have gone to seminary, but man, he knows probably more than I do that went to seminary. Why? Because he studies, and it makes me want to be better because of what he knows. And I do the same thing with Pastor Nick. Like he and I'll be like, I didn't really get this. Are you sure about this? And he and I will go back and forth, not in a fighting argument or anything like that, but just saying, hey, what do you mean by this? Because I want to know more, and this is what I mean by it. And so we can really work together to become better. And so that conviction of that. But what about also becoming that life is not about you? Man, I think serving is. Sometimes we put down the different ones. We think that it has to be like with us right here and Daniela behind me, and we want to be on these positions, but not realizing that if you're that person at the front door and someone walks in the door and you smile at someone for the first time, that you're their first interaction with someone that walks in. And then the next year, they get to know Jesus Christ, and they're getting baptized in the waters, and yet you were the first person they saw, and you made that connection. Because if they just came in and they were just frowning because you had a bad day, how many of you feel like serving every single Sunday, right? Sometimes you're like, I'm not feeling it today. But you're that person that smiled out there, and it connected them in, and now they're coming to know Jesus, and they're getting baptized. All of a sudden you realize that it's not about you in this moment, that God has something to do with you in someone else's life. So we have their confidence, their conviction, but also we have their trust. You see their trust in God no matter what the outcome was. But some of us are in that same situation where we need to trust God, but we still haven't done it. Some of us are living our faith through our spouse. They trust in God, and I'm following them, coming to church and everything, but I've never made that first step to be able to trust God. And guess what? There's a first step to be able to do that. It's not just coming to church, it's not just reading your Bible, but it's truly trusting in who God is and who He says He is. And some of you need to make that choice. Some of you come to church and you just hear Pastor Nick or Pastor Jamie or even me today and just saying, I believe in that, but you haven't believed in God. And you need to put your trust in Him. And so I just want to give you a time to be able to do that and say yes to Jesus, to make this faith your own, to have that trust in Him, because you saw what they were like. And so many of us falter because we haven't ever made that step to say yes to Jesus. So I just want to ask you to bow your heads with me. And if you're one of those that wants to say yes to Jesus, just pray this prayer with me. The prayer doesn't save you. It's the change of heart to say yes to Him. So if you'll pray with me. Dear God, please forgive me for the wrongs that I've done. Help me to follow you and make me new. Thank you for sending your Son to die on a cross for me. In Jesus' name, amen. If you're one of those, I would love that said that prayer today. I'd love for you to grab that green card that says, I have decided. Fill it out. On the back it says, I've decided to follow Jesus right there. We'd love to get you some materials to talk with you more about this relationship that you have just said yes to. It's not a life that we're just saying, hey, good job, way to go. It's something that we want to walk alongside you to do. But maybe some of you need to go ahead and do that serve that we talked about, that you haven't taken that step to say, you know what, I need that conviction of realizing who God is and that life isn't about me. And maybe serving here is how you do that. Or maybe you haven't gone into those life groups that we've already been talking about. You should have them, I believe, online, but also we'd love to talk to you more about those life groups at the Next Step tables. That's right behind this TV stand back here on the wall when you walk out. But maybe you're going through those storms right now and you don't know. Maybe you don't know where life is going to go. You don't know your next step because you're just stuck. And so we have this purple card. And we would love for you to come to the front to talk with our prayer team right here. There's two right here that would love to pray with you. But I also understand sometimes things are just personal. And sometimes we just want to kind of hold on to it. So if you'd fill this out, you can even put this in to them, or you can take this into the Dropbox. Because we are, if you haven't noticed, a praying church. And we want to pray for you. We'd love to pray over you, but if you're uncomfortable, we'd love to pray for you. And so if you guys would stand with me. I wonder if, even if you will trust God. Remember, this is not something that you can do just monthly or weekly. It's something that every single day you need to make a commitment that says, even if God, even if culture is going to call you out, will you still trust God? Even if you don't feel like it, will you trust God? Even if you don't know the outcome of what's coming up, will you trust God? And every single day you got to make that decision before the day starts, not after. Make it that morning. Make that your prayer this week that says, even if God, I'm going to follow you and trust you. I hope you guys have a great weekend, and we'll see you guys next week.